do a big jump here to Antarctica.
So a new discovery.
Antarctica.
Penguins.
This is crimereads.com, and we could split the read if you want to on this. It's a very interesting article at a very interesting time when considering all the things that are happening in Antarctica. The headline here, Encounters with the Supernatural in Antarctica, A Brief History. And it says, this was written by, I'm sorry, what was the author's name? I thought I had it here.
Crime Reads.
Yeah. Oh, Allie Wilkes wrote this article. I'm never really sure whether I believe in ghosts. Despite growing up in some seriously spooky and remote old houses, I've never actually seen anything. No figures in white sheets, no women in suspiciously generic period costume. However, particularly when alone, I felt, well, something. The sense of a presence. The idea that you're not actually alone, that something unseen is with you. Other people, of course, might experience this as the presence of the divine. But for me, it was always something supernatural.
Bit of a mix. What? Are they... Okay, all right. I know we're not, like, deconstructing this, but...
Not necessarily, but...
She sort of separates divine from supernatural?
Kind of weird, right?
Weird, yeah.
My debut novel, All the White Spaces, deals with a fictional expedition to Antarctica in the years immediately after the First World War. I chose to write about this setting due to a near-lifetime obsession with the so-called heroic age of exploration and the exploits of Scott, Shackleton, and other famous explorers who went south to risk their lives in the name of discovery.
Once I mention Admiral Byrd, I noticed.
Oh, I noticed. Yeah, I know. Once I started to read accounts associated with these early expeditions, I was struck by how eerie they made Antarctica sound. Despite the fact that the writers were your typical late Edwardian stiff upper lip gentlemen, many described supernatural or other disturbing encounters with something which sometimes seemed to be native to Antarctica itself. The first type of encounter, and most famous, is that of the third man. People in extremis have often encountered the sense of a watchful and benevolent or helpful individual accompanying them through dangerous situations. John Geiger's The Third Man Factor, Surviving the Impossible, is a comprehensive overview of the topic, collecting accounts from long-distance sailors, shipwreck survivors, mountaineers, miners, and polar explorers. The phenomenon is named for the experience of Ernest Shackleton and his two companions. And his two companions while crossing the mountainous interior of South Georgia Island in 1916. They were the only people alive who knew that their shipmates were waiting for rescue following the loss of their ship Endurance in the treacherous ice of the Weddell Sea. And their journey to find help at the whaling station across the mountain ranges involved scant rations, no sleep, crevasses, giant ice ridges, steep drops, and a near total lack of equipment. Shackleton's account of this journey is in his book, South, ends with the mysterious observation that, quote, when I look back at those days, I have no doubt that the Providence, with a capital P, guided us. I know that during that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. End quote. The sensation was one he shared with his companions when they had reached safety. Each had independently experienced the same sense that they had been accompanied by an invisible companion. The story later made its way onto T.S. Eliot's 1922 poem, The Waste Land. It reads the poem. We don't have to read that. This then was my introduction to the idea that I was in good, even illustrious company, having felt an unseen presence, and that Antarctic exploration might naturally lend itself to a spooky supernatural type of story, even with with very matter-of-fact narrators. This was only heightened by examining the extraordinary photographs which Frank Hurley took on the Endurance expedition. See, it's weird how they're bringing all this endurance stuff.
It's all
up.
Endurance. Yeah, right. I mean, good time for her to release this book or talk about this book, because for those who maybe missed the episode or haven't been keeping up, Endurance, Ernest Shackleton's failed sunk ship expedition, just got found. They just found it.
Almost preserved in pristine condition.
Preserved perfectly, like it's a ghost ship.
The ones which I found most intriguing juxtaposed jagged white endless ice fields with a single human figure shown perhaps for perspective. The figure is entirely in silhouette, faceless, utterly out of keeping with the silent landscape around him. It's hard to view them and not be struck by the eeriness of the image, a sense of presence made visible, intangible. The benevolent third man, which John Geiger dubs the savior presence, appears to be something distinct from our traditional understanding of ghosts. It appears in crisis situations and interacts with the observer, even if only to provide a sense of comfort. However, the Antarctic also contains stories of encounters with a less benevolent presence. The second type of encounter, again, doesn't fit neatly into the category of ghost, if by that we mean the spirit of a human person who has died, and often at the place in question, Antarctica, poses a bit of a conundrum on this front, as although it's certainly seen its share of deaths, its footprint on human occupation is far later and far sparser than most other places on the planet. So we are led to believe, unless you understand the ancient ramifications of the antediluvian world and the role Antarctica played. The story, which chilled me quite literally, took place on Sir Ranulph Fiennes's transglobal expedition in 1980 at the foot of Rivingen Mountain, where 4 members set up base camp to wait out the Antarctic winter. The team's radio operator was the formidable Virginia Lady Fiennes Guinea, who spent countless hours in the radio hut off over 50 meters from the team's main living quarters. She told her husband, quote, "There's something there," and spoke of an unsettling entity or presence which, on occasion, followed her when she left the hut. When another team flew in to dismantle the base, one newcomer described it as, quote, "an empty hut with an aura. I sealed it up as I knew I would not want to go back there," end quote. Guinea had apparently scratched graffiti into its walls about the ghost of Rivingen. And I'll just read this because it's 4 lines. "Why have you come to disturb me? After these many years, I will haunt and will taunt you and drive you away." This same sense of presence also described by men overwintering at the Argentine Antarctic base of Esperanza, and in similar terms always felt in the most isolated structures, usually at night, and amounting to, quote, "a strong sensation of being observed," although others troublingly reported seeing a male figure. Worse, perhaps, Fiennes described his wife hearing things, crying in the darkness, and someone, quote, "whispering indistinguishable words from close behind her." Oh my gosh, Joe Biden has been whispering into people's ears for generations.
Get vaccinated.
Third man.
I wrote the
bill. Burr, and I was to discover what? Hold on, sorry. Worst president behind her. Burr, and I was to discover not so different at all from what was sometimes experienced by other polar explorers. Shackleton's The Heart of the Antarctic opens with a teasing allusion to what might be termed the third type of polar supernatural encounter. He attributes the urge to go out into the void spaces of the world to the, quote, "lure of little voices, the mysterious fascination of the unknown." I found this idea of someone being tempted out into the wilderness by unseen voices so creepy that it formed the kernel of all the white spaces. And the Shackleton quotation in my novel's epigraph, the poem it refers to, "The Lure of Little Voices" by Robert Service, is even creepier still. Yes, they're wanting me. They're haunting me, the awful lonely places. They're whining and they're whimpering as if each had a soul. They're calling from the wilderness, the vast and godlike spaces, the stark and sullen solitudes that sentinel the pole. While there's never any acknowledgement that these little voices are anything other than figurative, I felt that they had their parallels in 2 experiences described by Apsley Cherry Garrard, one of the youngest members on Scott's tragic 1912 expedition to the South Pole. The setting for each experience was an extraordinary hut in itself something to conjure with. These man-made structures were built over 100 years ago and have been effectively frozen in time. Those who come across them describe having a powerful sense that the occupants have merely stepped out into the snow and will be back shortly, with books left open and provisions left half-eaten. This was Cherry Gerard's impression when coming across the abandoned Cape Royds hut, which he described as, quote, dismal. I expect to see people coming in through the door after the I expect to see people coming in through the door after a walk over the surrounding hill. Later that night, however, Cherry Gerard described hearing voices. The whole place is very eerie. There's such a feeling of life about it. Not only do I feel it, but the others do too. Or do also. Last night after I turned in, I could have sworn that I heard people shouting to each other. I thought that I had only got an attack of nerves, but Campbell asked me if I had heard any shouting, for he had certainly done so. It must have been the seals calling to each other, but it certainly did sound most human. Whew, this article is very long. It keeps going.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a great sort of recounting of a bunch of these little stories. But
let me get to the end here.
Give me the goods, man.
Let me just get to the bottom of the part here. What are we to make of all these encounters with the supernatural in Antarctica? Geiger's book explores a number of explanations for these experiences, including the obvious debunking favorites: cold, stress, fatigue, dehydration, near starvation, and the ability of the bored and desperate human mind to project onto the great white blank sheet of polar ice, to make patterns and seek company where none is to be had. This explains, for example, why so many encounters with the third man are helpful, consoling, comforting experiences. I was also deeply intrigued by the explanation put forward for those encounters at the Esperanza base, which features in a 1986 study by psychologist Jane Mosellen. All took place within the powerful electrical field of the station generator, and the base itself was located near a strong local magnetic anomaly. Interesting. A psychologist looking at magnetic anomalies in Antarctica having to do with those strange encounters in 1980.
Yeah.
However, what activated my horror writing mind was the idea that these might not be benign presences at all. That Shackleton's jealous eye of nature existed alongside Cherry Gerard's account of strange noises, which caused them to rush out of the safety of their base and into snow at night. That, like Guinea Fiennes' Ghosts of Rivingen, something wanted to haunt and taunt the explorers. And, while I might have sensed presences in eerie old houses, the idea that there's something there, how much scarier would it be to experience that in Antarctica, in the perpetual night, with no ability to leave? Antarctica as haunted house? Now there's an idea.
Wow.
There you go. I just thought it was a good overview of some of the historical accounts, and, you know, because, yeah, there's always some strangeness recorded throughout history by explorers. I mean, like supernatural encounters by explorers, you know, writing stuff down with weird things happening to them or seeing things. It's replete in history. And just thought I'd touch on it with the Antarctica thing because, you know, if we're talking about the setup, where things are going, it does seem like whatever they're going to continue to reveal about Antarctica, it's going to be like crazy sci-fi world type of stuff. You know, so it's natural to associate it with the supernatural.
We had a discussion last episode about the Olmec discovery.
Yep.
About Project Bluebeam and how it's always surrounding. You know, the
discovery.
The whole thing is a discovery, or is based on a discovery, and is, you know, supernatural in context. Just a quick review, if you haven't heard, Project Bluebeam was a U.S. Government project to create a technology where they could create either a hallucination or a hologram. Or something to originally convince people in the Middle East that Allah was appearing to them and telling them to obey the U.S. But, of course, has a very rich history and a lot of, complicated
conjecture
conspiracy theories and conjecture around it. But, you know, because of all the attention that Antarctica has been having, how it's being positioned at the center of some new age we're moving into, how it's the most important place on Earth and might be the Noah's Ark of Earth while climate change destroys everything. It would be a wonderful opportunity to bust out some blue beam supernatural type of something going on down there, I'd say.
Yeah, it doesn't. Some of the discovery type of stuff is very fascinating to me because, part of what, and this is kind of my eschatological view of Scripture and what I think is going to happen based on what the Bible says. But whatever begins the sacrifices again in Jerusalem, has something to do with
the third temple you're talking about.
Yeah, some have speculated that they're going to discover the Ark of the Covenant, and maybe that's what Antarctica's about. Maybe it's frozen. Maybe the Nazis took it to Antarctica and they tried to preserve the power in the ice, and now it's overpowering and it's melting.
Yeah, I love it.